Real stories of werewolves, of Dogman from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
Dogman Best Friend. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I used to be a lonely teenager, and if it hadn't been for the Dogman, I don't think I'd have really had any friends at all. I still remember those eyes, amber, wild, glowing between the trees as twilight settled over the woods. They belonged to my best friend, although I didn't know that's what he would be then. I was just a lonely kid shooting hoops at an abandoned basketball court behind my mom's new place. The ball's rhythm, the only conversation I had in those days. It was March of 1987, and my life had fractured like the ice on the nearby creek. Mom and Dad's divorce finalized with a whimper rather than with a bang, and suddenly I was transplanted from suburban Chicago to what felt like the edge of civilization, a ramshackle house on 3 acres of land in rural Wisconsin. Half my senior year was already gone, and there I was, the new kid with the wrong clothes and the wrong accent, too late to join any teams or clubs or even to make any friends. The previous owners had poured a small concrete pad and mounted a hoop on the edge of the woods, now warped and leaning like it was trying to escape into the trees. That's where I'd spend my afternoons, dribbling and shooting until my fingers numbed in the lingering winter chill, pretending the swish of the net was applause. That one particular evening, I went for a fadeaway jump shot that bounced hard off the rim, sailing into the thick brush beyond the clearing. I cursed, trudging after it, parting branches and thorny vines. That is when I heard a low, rumbling sound. Not quite a growl, not quite a breath. I froze. Something was moving in the shadows. And then, impossibly, my basketball arced back toward me, landing perfectly at my feet. I looked up to see him for the first time, standing 7.5 feet tall, his body an impossible merger of man and wolf. Broad shoulders covered in dark fur, a wolf-like head with a terrible, wonderful gaze, but standing upright, with arms that ended in something between paws and hands. Well, I should have run. You know I should have. But something in those eyes held me there. Curiosity, intelligence, and a loneliness that mirrored my own. The Dogman tilted his head, gestured toward the ball, and then back to the hoop. A challenge. My heart hammering, I picked up the ball, dribbled once, and I took the shot. That was how it began. For a week after our first encounter, I brought the basketball to the edge of the woods but stayed on the concrete pad watching the shadows. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of movement, the flash of those eyes. By Friday, my curiosity overcame my fear. I set the ball down at the forest's edge, and I stepped back. Minutes passed before he emerged, cautious, ears alert. He nudged the ball with his snout, then picked it up with those strange hands. His throw was awkward but powerful, sailing clear through the hoop. "Not bad," I said, my voice sounding strange after days of silence. "But can you do this?" I retrieved the ball and I attempted a hook shot that clanged pathetically off the backboard. The Dogman made a huffing sound that might as well have been laughter. After that day, he'd sometimes emerge from the trees while I practiced, watching silently from the edge of the clearing. Occasionally, he'd retrieve errant balls, always tossing them back with surprising gentleness. One afternoon, I brought sandwiches, leaving one on the stump at the forest's edge before retreating. He approached it warily, sniffed, then took it into the woods. The next day, I found wild strawberries in its place. Our routine developed its own rhythm. Basketball for an hour, then sitting in comfortable silence as the sun set. No need for words, just the chirping crickets and the occasional distant howl that would make his ears twitch. One twilight in early April, instead of retreating into the woods at dusk as usual, he gestured for me to follow. I hesitated only briefly before stepping beyond the boundary I had observed since moving there. The trees closed around us, and for the first time since Chicago, I felt something like a sense of belonging. Up close, the Dogman was even more remarkable than I first realized. His fur was not simply black as I had thought, but darkest brown with silver streaks along his flanks, giving him a distinguished look despite his wildness. He walked upright, but would occasionally drop to all fours when navigating difficult terrain, moving with grace either way. His eyes, though, those eyes were what fascinated me the most. They changed with the light, from amber to deep gold, expressing everything words couldn't express. At school, I remained invisible. I ate lunch alone, spoke only when called on in class, existed as a ghost in the hallways. The local kids had formed their cliques years ago. None had openings for a city boy with 1 foot already out the door. Their conversations about prom and graduation parties flowed around me, like I was a rock in a stream. But in the woods with the Dogman, silence wasn't lonely. Silence was our language. I started calling him Fenris after the wolf from Norse mythology I'd read about in English class. He seemed to recognize the name after a while, ears perking whenever I used it, although he never made sounds that resembled human speech. Some nights, when Mom worked late shifts at the hospital, I'd sneak out my bedroom window. Fenris always seemed to know when I was coming, waiting at the edge of the trees. We'd walk beneath the stars, his night vision guiding us along secret paths. I'd talk sometimes, telling him about Chicago, about my dad's new girlfriend who was only 10 years older than me, about how I didn't know what I was supposed to do after graduation. He'd listen, his head tilted, occasionally nudging my shoulder when my voice would crack with emotion. That spring was unusually warm, and as the days lengthened, so did our explorations. I began to understand his gestures. A flick of the ear meant danger. A particular head tilt was curiosity. A soft rumble in his chest was sort of something like contentment. I wondered sometimes if he was teaching me to be more like him, or if I was imagining the connection between us. Either way, I stopped feeling like the new kid, and I started feeling like something else entirely. Like something wild. Fenris became my guide to a world that had always existed parallel to mine, but that I'd never noticed before. He showed me deer trails that wound like secret arteries through the forest places, where the undergrowth cleared to reveal carpets of violets, the hollow trees where owls nested with their fluffy chicks. Under his tutelage, I learned which mushrooms bloomed safe to touch and which to avoid, how to recognize the subtle differences between raspberry and potentially harmful lookalikes. My mom would freak if she knew I was eating berries from the woods, I told him one day in May, juice staining my fingers purple from the early blackberries he'd led me to. Fenris responded by gathering more in his cupped hands, offering them with what I swore was a mischievous glint in his eyes. He seemed to catalog the forest not by human landmarks, but by scents and sounds. He'd stop suddenly sometimes, ears swiveling toward noises I couldn't detect. Once he pushed me behind a fallen oak and signaled for stillness just moments before a black bear ambled through the clearing ahead. I'd have walked right into the path without his warning. The bear paused, sniffing the air, then continued on its way, apparently respecting whatever invisible boundary Fenris had established in these woods. I brought my father's old Polaroid camera one afternoon, hoping to capture some of our discoveries, but whenever I raised the camera in Fenris's direction, he would slip just out of frame or turn away. The few images I did capture showed only a dark blur at the edge, as if the film itself couldn't quite translate his presence to something viewable in the human world. The woods behind my house expanded under Fenris's guidance, revealing themselves as not just acres, but an entire realm with its own rules and inhabitants. I began marking our journeys on a map I kept hidden under my mattress, using symbols rather than words. A circle for the blackberry patch, a wavy line for the creek crossing, a star for the clearing where we once spotted a white deer that bowed its head to Fenris before disappearing into the mist. Most precious of all were the artifacts we discovered: an arrowhead embedded in an ancient tree, a rusted trap that Fenris carefully triggered and buried, stones arranged in patterns too precise to be natural. Sometimes I'd find small objects left along our usual path, a perfect feather, an unusually shaped stone, once even a tarnished silver button that looked a century old. I was never sure if Fenris was leaving these gifts, or if they were offerings from the forest itself, acknowledging, that I was no longer entirely an outsider. "Where are we going?" I whispered, although I knew Fenris wouldn't answer. It was nearly midnight, the moon just past full, casting silver light through the canopy. We'd been walking for over an hour, far beyond any path I'd mapped before, into a part of the forest that felt older somehow, the trees gnarled and massive. Fenris moved with unusual caution, his steps silent despite his size. He led me to a moss-covered boulder and gestured for me to crouch behind it. Then he settled beside me, his breathing slow and deliberate, his eyes fixed on the small stream that burbled 20 yards away. I was about to whisper another question when Fenris's paw hand gently covered my mouth. His ears swiveled forward, and he nodded toward the water. At first I saw nothing, and then, like stars appearing as your eyes adjust to darkness, I began to notice tiny lights hovering above the stream. I blinked, thinking they were fireflies, but they moved with a weird sense of purpose, clustering around fallen branches that spanned halfway across the water. My breath caught as the lights resolved into forms, diminutive figures no taller than my hand, their bodies giving off a soft luminescence. They appeared to be constructing something, passing tiny objects between them, weaving what looked like strands of moonlight between the twigs. "What are they?" I breathed, the words barely audible even to myself. Fenris made no sound, but his eyes reflected the lights, ancient knowledge evident in his gaze. This wasn't his first time witnessing this scene. For nearly an hour, we watched the tiny beings work. They sang in voices like glass wind chimes, too high and delicate to make out words, if there were words at all. The half-bridge gradually extended across the stream, intricate and beautiful, woven with materials I couldn't identify, spider silk perhaps, or something less of this world. Near the end of their labor, one of the beings paused and turned, looking directly toward our hiding place. It raised a tiny hand, not an alarm, but what felt like an acknowledgement. Fenris inclined his head slightly in return. The fairy, if that's what it was, resumed its work. When the bridge was complete, spanning the stream with an arch that seemed impossibly delicate, the small lights began to dim. One by one, the beings disappeared into the undergrowth on the far bank, their song fading until only the sound of the stream remained. I sat in stunned silence, my worldview irreparably altered. Fenris waited patiently, giving me time to process what I'd seen. Finally, when my legs had gone numb from crouching, he nudged me gently and we began the long walk home. Dawn was breaking as we reached the edge of the woods behind my house. I turned to Fenris, thousands of questions on my tongue, but I found I couldn't quite speak a single one. He met my gaze, and in his eyes I saw understanding. Some things exist beyond words, beyond explanation. Some things you simply witness, and then carry with you for the rest of your life. As I slipped back through my bedroom window, exhausted but electric with discovery, I knew I would never see the world the same way again. The veil had been lifted, and Fenris had been my guide through the threshold. Mom's illness came suddenly in late July, pneumonia that turned serious overnight. One call from the hospital where she worked and my life changed again. I left a note at our usual meeting spot. "I have to go. I will be back." But I never was. I was forced to move to Dad's place in Milwaukee, which felt like a prison after the freedom of the woods. His new girlfriend watched me with suspicious eyes, and he buried himself in work rather than deal with a sullen teenager. 2 weeks of tension-filled dinners and nights spent staring at the ceiling was all I could take. With $200 from my savings and a backpack of clothes, I slipped out before dawn, boarding a Greyhound to New York City. The city swallowed me, just another runaway in a sea of lost souls. I slept in shelters until I found work washing dishes and then bussing tables. Eventually I got my GED and then a small apartment shared with 3 other guys. The rhythm of urban life replaced the forest cadence. Subway rumbles instead of distant howls. Concrete instead of moss underfoot. Sometimes walking through Central Park, I imagined glimpsing a familiar silhouette between the trees. I find myself scanning crowds for amber eyes that wouldn't be there. Every dog I passed got a second look. 20 years went by. I built a life. I had relationships that never quite filled the void left by that summer. No one understood when I tried to explain. My story reduced to an overactive teenage imagination, or worse, discussed as a coping mechanism for trauma. In my 40th year, I finally returned. The old house had new siding, and the basketball hoop had been replaced with a proper half-court. I walked the edge of the property until nightfall, then slipped into the woods, following paths that existed more in memory than reality. The clearing where we'd watched the ferry bridge was now overgrown, the stream diverted. No sign remained of magic or myth. I sat on a fallen log until the moon rose, feeling foolish, yet unable to leave. As I finally turned to go, something caught my eye. A perfect circle of wild strawberries, growing where none should be this late in the season. I knelt, picking one, the taste transporting me instantly back. Somewhere in the distance, something howled. Not quite wolf, not quite human. I never saw Fenris again. Some friendships transcend explanation, existing in the spaces between what we know and what we believe. He was real. He was my best friend. And in the quiet moments, when the world feels too ordinary, I still hear my silent friend calling me.
If I wear a spinny hat, will I look all hunky? Will I look like that handsome chap from that TV show, The Monkees? Everybody wants a woolen cat. The scary stories, beanie hat. Everybody knows it's a natural fact. The scary stories, beanie hat. Link is in this video's description if all goes according to plan. Available in black, which is like every color all at once, man.
Team Dogman for men of the world, and it also looks cute on girls. The hat says Dogman, I'm happy to meet you, but there's no guarantee that Dogman won't eat you. Team Dogman hat, it's the prescription. The link to get your own is in the description.
Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.